China has been encroaching upon Philippine territory in the South China Sea for years.
And a storm is brewing in the South China Sea.
Another confrontation has taken place between Chinese and Philippine vessels.
It's the second such event in 2 weeks.
These giant ships are essentially playing chicken.
A high seas confrontation that could ignite a war.
For the most part, the country didn't face a lot of resistance, which isn't surprising given its economic and military might, and in particular its large navy. Simply put, it takes immense courage to stand up to China. But recently, the Philippines has shown that sort of defiance as well, demonstrating remarkable bravery in the face of such overwhelming power. It's a tale as old as time, David versus Goliath. But Goliath was overconfident when facing off against David, mocking him with bravado. China, on the other hand, seems to fear its David, who looks determined to stand his ground come what may. Though to be fair, this hasn't always been the case. The Philippines was wary of making any bold declarations, feeling mercilessly bullied by China. So what changed? Why is a small island nation suddenly scaring a global military powerhouse? Keep watching to find out. Now, of course, we can't discuss how the situation in the South China Sea changed without first explaining the dynamics in the region. To the surprise of no one, China is the primary source of virtually all tensions in the South China Sea. Or to be more precise, China's sweeping claims of sovereignty over almost all of the 1.4 million square miles of this crucial waterway is the point of contention. Naturally, these brazen claims of indisputable sovereignty have put China at odds with other countries in the region, which all assert ownership of the islands, reefs, and undersea resources in the South China Sea, including the 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of untapped oil. The countries with the competing claims are Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, and of course the Philippines. China has responded to these competing claims by essentially trying to militarize the South China Sea, constructing artificial bases armed with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, fighting jets, and jamming equipment. The country's aggressive stance and unyielding commitment to these military bases have escalated tensions in the region, drawing international condemnation. They've practically turned the South China Sea into one of the most contested regions in the world, and a flashpoint for global conflagration. And yet, the Philippines seems to be the only nation in the region willing to openly and continuously confront China's territorial ambitions and military buildup. The confrontation in question has led to a series of naval run-ins primarily focused around two flashpoints, the Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal. The Second Thomas Shoal, also known as the Ayungin Shoal, is an 11 nautical mile long teardrop-shaped submerged reef, located in the Spratly Islands of the South China Sea, less than 200 nautical miles west of Palawan, the largest province in the Philippines. Although this territory is claimed by multiple nations, the Philippines is the only one to maintain a military presence in the Second Thomas Shoal. However, to be honest, the term military presence might be overselling it a bit. The presence in question is less than a dozen Philippine Navy Marines stationed on a 330-foot-long LST-542 class tank landing ship called the Sierra Madre. This ship was originally built for the U.S. Navy during World War II and transferred to the Philippines after the Vietnam War. But how did the Sierra Madre make it onto the Second Thomas Shoal, virtually becoming a makeshift military base? Actually, the Philippine Navy left it there on purpose. It deliberately ran the ship aground on the Second Thomas Shoal in 1999 in order to assert sovereignty over the area and maintain a continuous military presence. And that's precisely what it did for the last 25 years. Of course, the years also took a toll on the ship itself, which now resembles a rusty shipwreck straight out of a post-apocalyptic movie. But the Sierra Madre, with all its rust and holes, is still very much an actively commissioned ship in the Philippine Navy's roster. So any assault on the Sierra Madre would be classified as an act of war. Talk about Philippine ingenuity. Thanks to the Sierra Madre, China can't blockade the Second Thomas Shoal, which it had attempted on multiple occasions. Besides the obvious sovereignty aspect, this reef is also highly desirable for its lucrative fishing grounds and access to the nearby Reed Bank, packed with oil and natural gas reserves. The second notable flashpoint in the South China Sea, the Scarborough Shoal, is also teeming with fish. In fact, this 58-square-mile atoll is a traditional fishing ground for Filipino fishermen. Of course, the shoal's abundant fisheries aren't the only reason for the maritime standoff that has been going on for 12 years. The Scarborough Shoal is also strategically significant due to its location, making it a fantastic air and naval base. The nation that holds the Scarborough Shoal could potentially control the maritime traffic in the South China Sea. If this nation were China, the reefs of the Scarborough Shoal would be demolished, delicate corals ground up, and the debris used to build artificial landmasses to host massive missile sites, naval piers, and radar installations for its armed forces. That's the fate that befell other reefs and shoals in the South China Sea under Chinese control. However, the Philippines isn't allowing the same to happen to this shoal, which lies within the Philippines' Exclusive Economic Zone or EEZ, some 130 miles west of Luzon, the country's biggest island. That's why the Philippine vessels around the shoal always stand their ground, despite China's many attempts to intimidate them. Speaking of intimidation, China has been trying to assert its dominance through aggressive maneuvers against Philippine vessels for years. Ever since the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands, ruled that China's territorial claims in the South China Sea were legally invalid, the country has seemingly taken an alternative approach, choosing brute force over diplomacy. These displays of force have intensified in the last few years, undoubtedly escalating in the summer of 2024. So much so that the retired Filipino naval officer and former Senator Antonio Trillanes described the current relations between China and the Philippines as the worst in recent memory, while Teresita Ungsi, a Filipino civic leader and activist, said these relations are at their lowest ebb and on the brink of total breakdown. With this in mind, let's do a quick rundown of the major naval run-ins that have brought the relations between China and the Philippines to a boiling point. The summer of 2023 was when things first started warming up between the two nations. In August 2023, the China Coast Guard, or CCG, fired water cannons at Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG ships in the South China Sea. Chinese ships also performed dangerous maneuvers around the PCG vessels, which were escorting supply ships en route to the Second Thomas Shoal. In September, the PCG removed a 980-foot-long floating barrier installed to block the entrance to the lagoon at the Scarborough Shoal, leaving over 50 Philippine fishing boats outside the shoal. In October, a CCG ship and its accompanying vessel rammed a PCG ship and a military-run supply boat off the Second Thomas Shoal, damaging both. In November, China once again blasted a Philippine supply ship heading to the Second Thomas Shoal with water cannons. In December, the CCG did the same. But this time, General Romeo Bronner Jr., the head of the 150,000-member-strong Philippine Armed Forces, was aboard the vessel that got bumped. Tensions continued to escalate into 2024, as both sides hardened their positions in the South China Sea. On June 15, 2024, the China Coast Guard released new guidelines implementing its 2021 law authorizing officers to use lethal means on foreign ships in waters China claims. The guidelines allow detention of non-Chinese on suspicion of violating entry-exit laws of China, without formal charge for up to 60 days. On June 17, 2024, the China Coast Guard interfered with a resupply mission by the Philippine Navy near the Second Thomas Shoal, marking the most violent confrontation to date. Chinese Coast Guard personnel boarded Philippine boats and allegedly damaged communications equipment. 8 Filipino personnel were injured, with 1 losing a finger. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief Romeo Bronner Jr. described China's action as hijacking and piracy and demanded reparations. In the spring of 2024, the U.S. Army first deployed the Mid-Range Capability, or Typhoon missile system to Luzon, the Philippines' main island. The platform can fire both Standard Missile-6 interceptors and Tomahawk missiles, which can reach parts of southern China. China has repeatedly called the presence of both systems destabilizing and demanded their removal. The issue has further strained ties with the U.S. Defense Treaty ally. Though tensions have been growing between China and the Philippines at Second Thomas Shoal since 2021, shifts in tactics by Chinese Coast Guard and militia in 2024 have led to more damage being sustained by Philippine vessels, more injuries to Philippine personnel, and a higher risk of escalation. On June 17, the China Coast Guard surrounded, rammed, and boarded a Philippine Navy inflatable boat, using knives and axes to damage the vessel. The incident was the closest yet to qualifying as an armed attack that would trigger U.S. commitments under the Mutual Defense Treaty. General Bronner noted, "What was surprising was that they had bladed weapons with them. They had spears with them. A Filipino Navy SEAL lost his right thumb after the Chinese rammed his boat." Following the June 17 clash where Chinese and Philippine personnel came to direct physical blows, China and the Philippines held a meeting in Manila. They had frank and constructive discussions and affirmed their commitment to de-escalate tensions without prejudice to their respective positions. This resulted in a provisional arrangement concluded on July 21 for resupply missions to deliver daily necessities to personnel stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre. The South China Sea dispute has been called the most dangerous conflict no one is talking about. Over the past 2 years, tensions have escalated in waters where an international tribunal ruled the Philippines has exclusive economic rights. But China claims almost all of the South China Sea. But is peace truly possible in the Indo-Pacific region? Will the Philippines' growing confidence deter China from making rash decisions? Or will it only escalate tensions further? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Now go check out how the Philippines became key to U.S. Pacific strategy. Or click this other video instead.